predictions of gloom and doom in a world without racial preferences resonate with some people only because affirmative action has been debated for over 40 years, but is still largely misunderstood. For starters, racial preferences were most common at highly selective universities like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford that admit less than 10% of their applicants. They were less common in schools like Virginia Tech or the University of Missouri that admit well over half of their applicants. During the 2018 federal court case on this issue, Harvard's Dean of Admissions acknowledged that the school used different standards based on race to determine which prospective students receive recruitment letters. The university ranked applicants using an academic index comprising SAT scores and grades. These scores were broken into deciles, where the first decile is lowest and the 10th is highest. Harvard's own student data prove the school's two-tiered recruitment efforts were reflected in its admissions decisions. For instance, a Black student in the 4th decile and Hispanic student in the 6th decile had a higher chance of being admitted than an Asian student in the 10th decile. In the words of Justice John Harlan, the lone dissenter in Plessy versus Ferguson, our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens. In respect of civil rights, all citizens are equal before the law. The Supreme Court struck down the use of racial preferences in college admissions because they subjected Asian and white students to higher standards than their Black and Hispanic counterparts. But what of the claim, held by many progressive commentators, that eliminating these policies will return America to a pre-civil rights era of segregation and discrimination? It's simply not true. The highest performing Black applicants at Harvard have close to a 60% chance of being admitted. And for legacy Black students, that number rose to 99.9%. Put simply, no selective university is turning away Black students with the top grades and test scores. The main issue regarding race and enrollment at Harvard is that 75% of Black and 57% of Hispanic applicants are clustered in the bottom 3 deciles, compared to 16% of their Asian American and 24% of their white peers. The solution to this problem is higher performance at the K-12 level, not racial preferences at the collegiate level. Pity and paternalism do not lead to equality. Equality cannot be enforced through mandates or quotas. It cannot be declared through fiat or executive order. Any other policies that apply different standards based on race in order to achieve demographic representation only reinforce inequality because it is impossible to lower expectations and raise performance at the same time. If we want to cultivate a truly diverse college campus that passes constitutional muster, we must pursue several long-term strategies at the K-12 level. First, promote and advance education choice, specifically through options like education savings accounts, which have been implemented in Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, Utah, and West Virginia. Second, local policymakers should create pathways for gifted students to receive progressively challenging work in school as well as specialized education programs outside the classroom. Third, we need to focus on one of the most important drivers of educational outcomes, family structure. Decades of research have strengthened the conclusion that children raised in homes with their married biological parents have better academic and behavioral outcomes than children raised in any other family arrangement. But today, 40% of American children are born to unmarried parents and 23% live in single-parent homes, the highest rate in the world. Any attempts to improve education outcomes, whether on a K-12 or post-secondary level, must include changes in policy and culture that encourage marriage and strengthen families. This is why some schools are looking for ways to incorporate the success sequence into the classroom. Students need to know that people who finish high school, secure stable employment, and marry before having children have a single-digit poverty rate by their mid-30s. The takeaway for politicians, policymakers, and pundits should be clear. A student's family, home environment, study habits, and school quality play a much larger role in determining their academic outcomes than their skin color. Public policy should reflect these facts, not be used to socially engineer outcomes in ways that violate basic constitutional principles. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Squires. Under Committee Rule 9, we will now question witnesses under 5-minute rule. I will begin the process. Mr. Squires, in this subcommittee, there's been many discussions what diversity should mean Too many people focus exclusively on identity diversity. In contrast, you've spoken about a need for a wider net diversity. What is wider net diversity, and why should it be a standard adopted to today's college campuses?
So put simply, when I talk about wider net diversity, I'm talking about extending and expanding opportunity to groups or individuals who may not have access to opportunity at a particular time. But the key for wider net diversity is to uphold the same standards across the board. Now, a perfect example of that from history, and where we could talk about real racial discrimination, I would say would be the Tuskegee Airmen, who obviously could not serve as aviators because of racial discrimination in the armed forces. But when those opportunities came, they demanded that they had to meet the same standards as their counterparts. And in fact, obviously, they have a stellar service record and won the United States Air Force's first Top Gun competition in the late 40s. Now, wider net diversity I would contrast with lower bar diversity, which seeks to prioritize superficial identity categories in order to create a demographically representative population. So I'm always for wider net, and I think that lower bar does anyone a grave disservice.